Someone asked me when I got to the convention center if my biography was false, and I said yes. Mr. Dexter, Madame Hébert, Mr. Prentice, Mr. Flaherty, Mr. Mitchell, chers invités et amis, and especially distinguished honorees, it is a huge honor to be part of your list, your table. It is a huge honor for me to be receiving this award tonight. And I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about how Youth Fusion got here and about how, by engaging youth today, we can unlock tomorrow's leaders. As many of you know, Youth Fusion counters dropout rates in high schools. And dropping out is a tragedy. If we think about it, every kid who drops out of high school lacks the fundamental skills to thrive in our fast-paced, information-rich society. And yet, despite the fact that we live in one of the richest countries on the face of the planet, we have many high schools in First Nations or in big cities where dropout rates go as high as 85%. 8 jeunes sur 10 quittent les bancs de ces écoles sans avoir un diplôme d'études secondaires. And it's a vicious cycle, meaning that the communities that need leadership the most have maybe the fewest leaders. And I have been lucky enough to be part of projects here and abroad. And when I heard about this diploma gap in Quebec and across Canada, I set out to visit many high schools across Quebec mostly. And as I talked to thousands of kids about my work, I would ask them one question: what would keep you motivated? And their answers were very simple. They would say, make us part of projects that compel us. Nous voulons faire partie de projets et d'activités qui nous compellent, qui nous interpellent, pardon. Et they really asked for hands-on projects, activities that were part of the real-world experience, whether they cared about the environment, about technology, or about creative arts. They wanted to be engaged. And at the end of my sessions, teachers and principals would come up to me and say, we never really ask our students what it is that they want. And so, armed with this feedback, I returned to Montreal and I contacted Cathy Assayag, Vice President at Concordia, and Evelyn Abitbol, Government Relations Director at Concordia, because I knew that they would help. I had the seed of an idea and I knew that they could do something about this idea I had. And the idea was pretty simple and yet had never really been implemented in such a way across Canada. The idea was, let's hire university students and recent graduates in many fields and send them into these high schools to work with kids 15 hours per week from September till June. And they said yes. And so we matched the graduates' backgrounds with real-life projects, and environmental students started green teams and promoted sustainable development. Journalism students started newspapers. Music students started concerts and taught music. Business students implemented entrepreneurial projects and businesses in these high schools. Engineering students organized science fairs and built robots with the kids. And political science students promoted civil responsibility and democratic engagement. And the idea caught on. Absenteeism rates went down, graduation rates went up, participation rates went up, thanks to these young people working with young people. And if you think about it, children in the most disadvantaged areas and high schools were being part of compelling practical ideas, and university students and recent graduates were getting maybe their first job in their own field. We all know how hard that is sometimes to graduate and maybe not have a job when you get out of there. And these university students were getting these jobs, and they were benefiting from it. And in 2 years, we went from 7 university students hired to 35, from 2 schools to 14, including 2 high schools in the Cree Nations in northern Quebec, from 1 university on board as a partner to 7, and from 1 employee to 40. And les projets continuent à grandir de jour en jour, and I'd like to share one of my favorite examples of how it actually works. At the beginning of April, about a month ago, 45 kids from 4 public high schools in Montreal traveled from Montreal to Toronto. And for many of them, it was their first time in a new city. And they were facing a huge challenge here in Toronto. They were participating at a robotics competition. And prior to this competition, they were given 6 weeks to build robots that could play soccer. And you know, it was our first time here in Toronto at this competition called First. And our robots, our 4 robots, were pretty simple. But when we got here, we realized that our 4 simple robots had to face 48 opponents that had advanced technologies like multi-directional wheels and arms to hang themselves, and could score goals from 20 feet away from the target. It was really, really impressive. And despite the fact that it was so intense and so intimidating at times, our kids still managed to get all the way to the semifinals to beat those crazy monsters, like the Habs did last night. Right? So we're very proud. And they even won the Judges Award for Perseverance, which was very exciting for us. Not the Canadians, our kids. And my favorite part of this story here in Toronto is that this kid in our program came up to me at the end of the competition and said, "Okay, I think I've decided. I want to become an engineer." And then he said, "But we'll be back next year, right? But I want you to promise something before we return to Montreal." And I said, "Of course, anything you want." And he said, "Promise me that next year we'll get those multi-directional wheels." And I said, "Yes, of course." This kid was on the verge of dropping out a year ago. He wasn't going to his classes anymore. He wasn't studying anymore. And this is the project that got him back on board. He was not only going to his classes, he was building the robot during the lunch break after school, and came to school even on the weekend to make sure that his robot would work properly. And he wasn't thinking about dropping out anymore. He was thinking about growing, improving, and coming back to Toronto to claim the victory he knew was his. And it was maybe one of the moments that touched me the most in my young career. And I'd like to thank Jacques Ménard, who is the president, the chairman of Youth Fusion. And he's so inspiring with his work in Quebec as the president of BMO Financial Group. And I'd like to thank Damien Siles and Evelyn Abitbol for supporting me every day. I'd like to thank Kathy Asayag, who is the vice president at Concordia, for taking such a daring chance. I'd like to thank Desiree McGraw for offering me so much at the Jeanne Sauvé Foundation. And I'd like to thank Claude La Jeunesse and Nicole La Jeunesse for believing in me when I was just a student at Concordia and when Dr. La Jeunesse was president at Concordia. I'd like to thank Mark Bratner and Gordon Homer for your inspiration and recognition of science and technology. I know you're here somewhere, but I don't know where. I'd like to thank Tim Broadhead for your cutting-edge social innovation. And I'd like to thank the Public Policy Forum and Mr. David Mitchell, and of course, TD Financial Group, can't forget the sponsor, for granting me this Emerging Leader Award. I am looking forward to joining the project to find ways to engage youth in public service. We need to empower youth, and we need to do it today. Et comme ma collègue me disait aujourd'hui, il faut développer des projets intergénérationnels à travers lesquels on va transférer les connaissances et le savoir. And that's why I want to thank you all with your dedication, with your enthusiasm, with your support. We're getting kids thinking about what it is that they want to be rather than wondering what they could have been, and we're turning them into leaders one student at a time. And in doing so, we're transforming communities, and we are, after all, enriching our great nation. And if you do want to find out more about Youth Fusion, I'll be sitting right there. And I'll be trying to convince Mr. Flaherty to, help Youth Fusion. Merci et bonne soirée.